That's a real tease.
Yes, on purpose.
On purpose, okay. What's our next excerpt?
Well, I wanted to know if any of the singers had any burning desire to share anything.
This is the sharing microphone.
I'll share my cool fact about the glass harmonica. This is one of my favorite things because the first time I ever saw the Mad Scene was with the glass harmonica. It was a YouTube clip, and I was fascinated and spellbound, and I had to know what it was. And so if you've ever seen them, they're these bowls that are inset, and they run through a thing of water, and it's usually like a foot crank that keeps the thing running. And he used it in the Mad Scene because the people that played it often went crazy because the bowls were painted with a thin line of gold paint around the edges, and that was because the paint included mercury in it. And so the people that would play it would slowly get little pieces of mercury embedded in their fingers, and they would go crazy. And that's my cool fact about the glass harmonica.
Nice. And I'm told that each particular note was a different color, so those of us who were colorblind couldn't possibly play it.
I actually saw a production in which they used it in Connecticut many, many years ago. And I think part of the problem is in the very large theaters, it's quite a delicate sound, as you can imagine. And I think they mic'd it a bit, but it makes all the difference in the world. It is amazing, amazing. Any other sharing?
I just wanted to share that we've been very lucky to work with Maestro Mekatsource through this process, and that especially as a singer who comes to the game a bit late, like instrumentalists usually are playing their instrument since they're 5 years old, but we can't do that. So it's pretty invaluable, and I think to work with Maestro, but I think this opera in particular provides such a good platform for understanding colors and understanding interpretation and how there are millions of different things you can do, but to get together and just focus on what that is and what it means has been a truly rewarding experience for me.
Okay, no other. Oh, we have a question, yes.
Yay.
For Lucia, in preparing for this role, did you listen to Maria Callas and Joan Sutherland? Yes. And then the second part of the question is, do you try to imitate or differentiate?
So I think the goal is not to imitate, but definitely to learn what it is that they did, because all they're offering is another interpretation. That is, I mean, truly, how do you say, just like, how can you, organic, but masterful. They give you such a consummate performance. And as young singers, that can be more difficult to do because you're more in your head about certain things. But absolutely, we listen to those singers. I think Meryl probably did as well. But they just offer so much in terms of every single time they open their mouth, they're expressing something, which is difficult to learn how to do.
Well, and I also want to say if we were to try to imitate one of the great sopranos doing this, which is such a daunting task, we would sound like a poor imitation as opposed to trying to craft our own way of being unique in such a challenging role.
Oh, yes?
Another question?
How explicit was Donizetti in his markings? Is there a lot left open to the interpretation, or is he detailed?
Well, in the bel canto period, I think they basically, my theory of it is they stripped away, the orchestration becomes simpler, much simpler. The vocal line is filled with melismas, which allow on just vowel sounds for the voice to dominate, just the vibrations of the voice. The plots are often fairly simple, all in the attempt, in my view, to sort of heighten the expression of the voice, right? So a lot of what we've been working on, because sometimes there's a text, there'll be an entire aria will consist of like 2 sentences, if that, right? And these words repeat often, and sometimes the music repeats as well. So since they're in theater, there's really no such thing as a repeat. Even in music, there's no such thing as a repeat. It's always a development. Even if the musical notes are the same or the text is the same, the character is developing, the situation is developing. So when you say the words the first time, it has one meaning, but when you go to repeat them, it must mean something else. They must be said for emphasis or confirmation of what they said the first time, or subtext in which the dramatic expression changes, and it may not always be literally lined up with the text, right? So a lot of what we're building in these repeats is a development of the storytelling in which something has changed, right?
And with regards to the actual musical score, there's far less what we call expression marks, saying, here do a crescendo, here make this louder and softer, vice versa. He does it a lot through musical sections. For instance, he'll have this next scene that we have coming up, you'll hear a couple measures introduction, where Lucia is very sad and hesitant. It's her wedding day and she doesn't want to get married to this guy. And it's this solo oboe and these strings underneath, and it's very mournful and sorrowful. I mean, it gives you immediately within a second or two what you need, what the audience needs to know what the scene is going on and about. Now, how a conductor and the orchestra, the musicians craft that, do they push the tempo a little bit here, do they put a little crescendo? That's left up to the interpretation of the musicians. Whereas some other composers might have dictated it much more clearly and said, no, I have to have it this way. So in a way, he's given us a little bit more freedom, but it, as Nick said, it's so obvious, the story is so obvious, the emotions are so obvious that I don't think you can go too far astray from where the composer intended.
And also, I would just add that the composers of that time, it was understood that the singers had a musical language and expression where they didn't have to state it, right? Just the actual notes and rhythms gave them the immediate indication, and the singers, because they would, like you said, the lady who premiered it would change her cadenzas every time. It's like jazz singers. They would go by their feelings, and on a given night, they might feel that scene a slightly different way, and they would change their cadenza. So there was much more flexibility at time, like as it was in the time of Handel. Right, there was a lot of, the singers brought a lot to the score, so the composer basically made a kind of a giant
And
outline.
I think also I'm sitting here, from a practical standpoint, if he wrote this score within 6 weeks from putting pen to paper and finishing it, you can't get too detailed. It's like the Mozart and Bach. I mean, it's people who were just writing and writing and writing, and as soon as it dried, we're passing it off to the copier. I mean, they didn't have photocopy machines. Please make 30 copies in a half an hour. No, you had to have someone write it out for all the musicians, plus give it to the singers and have them learn it, and then stage it. So there's a lot going on.
Should we go on to the next excerpt? What is the next excerpt? What are we doing?
Enrico and Lucia.
Enrico and Lucia. Okay, so Jared Bybee this time is singing Enrico, and Merrill Dominguez is singing Lucia. And in this scene, which occurs directly after the duet we almost finished, in this scene, it is now the wedding day of Lucia and Arturo Bucklaw. And remember, Edgardo has gone away to France to sort of fix his political standing. And while he's been away, which is for about a month, Enrico every day has been pressing Lucia to agree to marry Arturo Bucklaw in order to save the family. So it's very much a sort of a sacrifice for the family that she's being asked to make. And she has stubbornly refused and refused and refused. And now it's a wedding day. The wedding guests are arriving. And in this scene, he finally has to get her to change her attitude and to go through with the wedding. So the way we're doing it, she's in her wedding gown to begin with, and about to go into the ceremony. But Enrico needs to know that once they start the ceremony, she won't do something foolish or back out, right? So in this scene, he's really trying to lock down the deal, and well, you'll see what happens. Okay.